Thomas Blackwood couldn't remember what the sunset looked like anymore. 5 years had passed since the lab accident that took his sight. 5 years of learning to navigate a world of darkness, of training his other senses to compensate for what he'd lost. The doctors had called it a miracle that he'd survived at all. The explosion should have killed him. Instead, it had merely stolen his eyes. "Mr. Blackwood, your coffee is on the table to your right, about 8 inches from the edge," said his housekeeper, Mrs. Chen. Thomas smiled and reached for the cup with practiced precision. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. Is it raining today? I can smell it in the air." "Yes, sir. Started about an hour ago. Your 10 o'clock appointment called to say they'll be running 15 minutes late because of traffic." Thomas nodded and sipped his coffee. Black, no sugar, just the way he liked it. His remaining senses had sharpened remarkably over the years. He could identify people by their footsteps now, could tell which of his staff had entered a room by the subtle differences in their cologne or perfume, could even sense when someone was nervous by the smallest changes in their breathing. At 45, Thomas had built Blacktech Industries from nothing into one of the most successful technology companies in the country. The accident hadn't changed that. If anything, losing his sight had only made him more determined to succeed, to prove that his disability couldn't define him or limit what he could achieve. His phone buzzed on the table. Blacktech voice assistant activated. "You have a message. From Richard Parker. Final contract revisions complete for the Henderson merger. Ready for your review this afternoon. Send reply. Good work. Let's go through it at 2 p.m. in my office." Thomas stood and walked confidently across his penthouse living room, trailing his fingertips along the back of the sofa for guidance. He'd memorized the layout of every room in his home, knew exactly how many steps it took to get from his bed to the bathroom, from the elevator to his office desk. His world had become a carefully measured grid in his mind. The doorbell chimed softly. "Mr. Blackwood, that's Paul with your suit for tonight's event." Mrs. Chen called from the kitchen. "Please show him in." Thomas heard the door open, followed by the familiar sound of Paul's slightly uneven gait. The tailor had been making Thomas's clothes for over a decade, adapting seamlessly when Thomas lost his sight by adding subtle texture markers to help him identify colors and match items properly. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," Paul said cheerfully. "I've brought your tuxedo for the charity gala, black with the midnight blue vest as you requested. I've added the textured button on the left cuff so you can easily identify it." "Thank you, Paul. You're a lifesaver. I can't show up looking anything less than perfect tonight. The business press would have a field day. Blind billionaire can't even dress himself." Thomas laughed, but there was a hint of bitterness in it. "Never on my watch, sir," Paul replied with warm confidence. "Would you like to try it on to make sure everything fits just right?" 20 minutes later, Thomas stood before what he knew was a full-length mirror, though he couldn't see his reflection. But Paul's satisfied sounds told him everything he needed to know. "Perfect, sir. You'll be the best-dressed man at the gala, as always." After Paul left, Thomas returned to his home office. His computer was equipped with the most advanced screen-reading technology available, much of it developed by his own company after his accident. He worked steadily through the morning, reviewing reports and dictating responses to emails. Richard Parker, his chief operating officer and oldest friend, arrived promptly at 2 p.m. Thomas could smell his distinctive sandalwood cologne as soon as he stepped off the elevator. "The Henderson deal is going to make us a fortune," Richard said after they'd gone through the contract details. "Your instincts were right again." Thomas leaned back in his chair. "Sometimes I think losing my sight made my business sense sharper. When you can't see what's in front of you, you have to look deeper. Well, whatever it is, it works." Blacktech stock hit another all-time high this morning. Richard paused. "Are you sure you want to go to this gala tonight? I could represent the company if you'd prefer a quiet evening." Thomas shook his head firmly. "I need to be there. We're announcing the new accessibility initiative. Besides, hiding away won't help anybody, least of all me." Later that evening, Thomas's driver, Hank, helped him from the car. The sounds of the city enveloped him. Traffic, distant conversations, the click of high heels on pavement. Camera shutters as photographers captured his arrival. "Mr. Blackwood, over here. Thomas, how's the new product launch coming along? Any comment on the rumors of a government contract?" Thomas smiled in the direction of the voices, raising a hand in acknowledgement as Hank guided him toward the entrance. He'd learned to handle the press with easy charm, never showing how much he hated being unable to see who was speaking to him. Inside the grand hotel ballroom, the cacophony of voices, clinking glasses, and background music washed over him. These events were always challenging, navigating crowds, making small talk with people he couldn't see, pretending he didn't notice the awkward pauses when someone forgot and made a visual reference. "Mr. Blackwood, welcome." The gala chairwoman, Nancy Winters, touched his arm lightly. "We're so honored to have Black Tech as our main sponsor this year. Your table is just this way." Thomas followed her lead, his cane tapping discreetly against the floor. He nodded and smiled at greetings called out as he passed, relying on Richard, who walked slightly behind him, to whisper identifications when needed. At his table, Thomas was introduced to the other guests, mostly fellow donors and board members of the Children's Hospital that was benefiting from the night's fundraiser. He shook hands, made pleasant conversation, and tried to ignore the whispers he could hear from nearby tables. Such a shame about his accident. They say he's even more brilliant now. How does he run a company without being able to see? He'd grown accustomed to being the subject of speculation and pity. It no longer bothered him, or at least, that's what he told himself. Midway through the dinner, as Thomas was finishing his main course, a server approached the table. "Excuse me, sir, but there's a small issue with the donation processing system. Ms. Winters wondered if you might be able to help, given your technical expertise." Thomas nodded. "Of course." As he stood to follow the server, a commotion at a nearby table caught his attention, the sound of a glass shattering followed by a woman's embarrassed apology. "I'm so sorry. How clumsy of me," said a voice unlike any Thomas had heard before. It was melodic, with a slight accent he couldn't quite place. Thomas paused, inexplicably drawn to the voice. "Do you need assistance with something else, Mr. Blackwood?" the server asked. No, please lead the way," Thomas said, but he found himself straining to hear more of that distinctive voice as he was led from the ballroom. The technical issue was minor and quickly resolved. As Thomas made his way back to his table, someone bumped into him at the edge of the dance floor. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry," said the same melodic voice he'd noticed earlier. Thomas smiled. "No harm done?" "You're Thomas Blackwood," the woman said. It wasn't a question. "Guilty as charged." "And you are?" Vivian Reeves. I'm new to the hospital board. This is my first gala." "And how are you finding it?" Thomas asked, genuinely curious. "Honestly? A bit overwhelming. So many important people in one room." Thomas laughed. "Don't be fooled. We're all just people trying to do some good in the world. Would you?" She hesitated. "Would you like to dance? The band is playing something slow." Thomas was taken aback. It had been years since anyone had asked him to dance. Most people assumed he couldn't or wouldn't want to. "I'd be delighted, but I should warn you I might step on your toes." "I'll risk it," Vivian said, and Thomas could hear the smile in her voice. She took his hand and led him to the dance floor. Thomas moved carefully, counting steps in his head as they swayed to the music. Vivian was patient, guiding him subtly without making him feel helpless. "You smell like jasmine," Thomas said. "My perfume. How observant of you." When one sense goes, the others try to make up for it. They danced for 2 songs, talking easily. Vivian described the room to him, not with pity but as if sharing a secret with a friend. She told him about the woman in the ridiculous feathered hat, the man who kept checking his reflection in the silver serving trays, the beautiful ice sculpture slowly melting on the dessert table. For the first time in years, Thomas felt truly seen, not just as the blind billionaire, but as a man. When they finally returned to their respective tables, Thomas found himself smiling. Richard leaned over. "Who was that?" he asked quietly. "Vivian Reeves, new hospital board member." "She's gorgeous," Richard commented, "and seemed quite taken with you." Thomas shrugged, but inside something long dormant stirred to life. He hadn't felt this kind of connection since before the accident. It was both thrilling and terrifying. What Thomas couldn't see was the calculating gleam in Vivian's eyes as she watched him from across the room, or the slight nod she exchanged with a man standing near the exit. If he could have, perhaps he would have recognized the first move in a game where he was the unwitting prize. But in that moment, all Thomas knew was that for the first time in a very long time, he was looking forward to tomorrow. 3 months after meeting Vivian at the charity gala, Thomas's life had transformed completely. Their whirlwind romance blossomed with an intensity that surprised everyone, especially Richard, who had never seen his friend fall so hard or so fast for anyone. "You're sure about this?" Richard asked one afternoon as they sat in Thomas's office, reviewing quarterly reports. "You've only known her a short time," Thomas smiled, his unseeing eyes crinkling at the corners. "When you know, you know. Besides, when you can't rely on sight, you learn to trust your other senses. And everything about Vivian feels right." Richard made a non-committal sound. "She's certainly made herself at home in your life." It was true. Vivian had smoothly inserted herself into every aspect of Thomas's world. She'd charmed his staff, learned his routines, and within weeks had moved into his penthouse. Now she accompanied him to business meetings, charity functions, and industry events. Her melodic voice was often the last thing Thomas heard before, falling asleep and the first sound to greet him each morning. The engagement happened 6 weeks after they met, a private moment in Thomas's apartment with a ring Vivian had helped select. The business press had a field day with the story. The blind billionaire and the beautiful newcomer, a romance straight out of a fairy tale. Black Tech voice assistant activated, announced Thomas's phone one Tuesday morning as he dressed for work. "You have a meeting at the research lab at 10 a.m. to review the new accessibility prototypes." Thomas nodded to himself as he finished knotting his tie. The lab visits always brought mixed feelings. Pride in the innovations his company was in creating to help others with disabilities, but also painful reminders of the accident that had cost him his sight. "Do you want me to come with you?" Vivian asked, her voice floating from the bathroom where she was applying her makeup. A routine Thomas could track by the subtle sounds of bottles opening and closing, the soft sweep of brushes. "Not today," Thomas replied. "These technical reviews can be tedious. Besides, don't you have that lunch with the hospital board?" "I could cancel," she offered, but Thomas detected a note of relief in her voice. "No need. I'll have Richard with me." An hour later, Thomas walked through the familiar corridors of Black Tech's main research facility, his cane tapping lightly against the polished floors. He knew every turn by heart, 20 steps from the elevator to the security doors, then 15 more to the main laboratory entrance. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," called several voices as he entered the lab space. "Morning, everyone," Thomas replied warmly. "What breakthroughs do you have for me today?" The team spent the next 2 hours demonstrating their latest prototypes, a new text-to-speech system that captured emotional nuances in written text, haptic gloves that could translate visual data into tactile sensations, and improvements to their spatial audio navigation system. Thomas tested each innovation himself, offering suggestions and asking pointed questions. Despite his disability, or perhaps because of it, he remained the most valuable critic of the company's accessibility technology. As the meeting wrapped up, Thomas asked to be shown to the break room. "I could use some coffee before heading back to the office," he explained to Richard. "I can have someone bring it to you," Richard offered. Thomas shook his head. "I need to stretch my legs, I know the way." He made his way down the hallway, counting steps in his head. The research floor was busier than usual, with voices and footsteps indicating several ongoing projects. As Thomas rounded the corner toward the break room, something solid collided with him, a person rushing in the opposite direction. Hot liquid splashed across his chest, followed by a young woman's gasp of horror. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." The voice was panicked, youthful. "I wasn't looking where I was going. Your suit, I've ruined it." Thomas felt the coffee soaking through his shirt, but he smiled reassuringly. "It's just coffee. No permanent damage done." "But it's all over you," the young woman fretted. "Here, let me help." Before Thomas could protest, he felt paper towels dabbing at his chest. Gentle, but efficient. "I'm Maya, by the way," she said as she worked. "I'm an intern in the biomedical division. First day and I'm already assaulting the CEO. I'm pretty sure that's some kind of record." Thomas chuckled despite himself. Thomas Blackwood. And trust me, this isn't the worst first day story I've heard. Still, I feel terrible. Maya's voice grew thoughtful. "Wait here a second." Thomas heard her footsteps hurry away and return moments later. "I keep an extra shirt in my locker for lab work," she explained. "It's men's size medium. Will that work? It's better than sitting in a wet shirt all day." Thomas was touched by the simple kindness. "That would be perfect, actually. Thank you. The break room is just here," Maya said, lightly touching his elbow. "You can change in the attached restroom." 10 minutes later, Thomas emerged from the restroom wearing Maya's spare shirt, a simple button-down that was slightly too small but would do until he could get back to his office. The coffee stain on his suit jacket was less noticeable, but his tie was a lost cause. "Better?" Maya asked. "Much. Thank you for the rescue. Least I could do after causing the disaster in the first place." There was a smile in her voice. "Can I get you that coffee you were coming for? Without wearing it this time?" Thomas laughed. "That would be great." They sat at a small table in the corner of the break room, the sounds of other employees coming and going around them. Maya was easy to talk to, her enthusiasm for her work evident as she described the biomedical research she was involved with. "So, you're working on cellular regeneration?" Thomas asked, intrigued. "Yes, but with an unconventional approach," Maya explained. "I'm combining traditional medical research with some alternative healing methods my family has practiced for generations." "Alternative healing?" Thomas raised an eyebrow. "I know how it sounds," Maya said quickly. "But there's real science behind it. My grandmother could reduce fevers with just her hands. My mother helped cancer patients manage pain without medication. There's something there worth studying properly." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "I've always believed science hasn't discovered everything yet. That's why we fund speculative research others might dismiss." Their conversation was interrupted by Richard's arrival. "There you are," he said to Thomas. "I've been looking everywhere. What happened to your clothes?" "Coffee accident," Thomas explained. "Maya here came to my rescue." "Nice to meet you," Richard said, his tone professional but cool. "Mr. Blackwood, we should get going. Your 1 o'clock appointment was moved up." Thomas stood, genuinely reluctant to end the conversation. "Thank you again for the shirt, Maya. I'll have it cleaned and returned." "Keep it," she said. "Consider it a welcome gift to the biomedical department." Over the next few weeks, Thomas found himself visiting the research lab more frequently than usual. He told himself it was to check on the accessibility projects, but he always managed to find his way to the biomedical section where Maya worked. There, conversations continued, growing deeper and more personal with each meeting. Maya never treated him with the awkward deference others sometimes showed. She described her work in vivid detail, guided him through the lab to feel the equipment they used, and asked his opinion on ethical questions raised by their research. 1. Rainy afternoon. Thomas sat with Maya in the small garden atrium at the center of the research building. The sound of water droplets hitting the glass ceiling created a peaceful backdrop to their conversation. "My family would call this listening weather," Maya said softly. "Listening weather?" Thomas repeated. "Days when the veil between worlds is thin. When healing is most powerful." She paused. "Thomas, there's something I've wanted to tell you, but I wasn't sure how." Thomas turned toward her voice. "You can tell me anything." Maya took a deep breath. "My family's healing abilities. They're more than just reducing fevers or managing pain. For generations, we've been able to heal certain conditions that modern medicine considers permanent." Thomas felt his heart rate increase. "What kinds of conditions?" "Various ones. Joint diseases, skin conditions." She hesitated. "And sometimes sensory restoration." The atrium seemed suddenly very quiet, the raindrops fading into the background. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Thomas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I can heal your eyes, Maya said simply. Not overnight and not completely at first, but gradually with regular sessions, I believe I could restore at least some of your vision. Thomas sat very still, his mind racing. That's impossible. The best doctors in the world examined me. The nerve damage is irreversible. Western medicine has its limitations, Maya replied. What my family practices works on different principles. We don't fully understand how, but we've documented hundreds of cases over generations. Why would you offer this to me? Thomas asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. What do you want in return? Maya's response was immediate and sincere. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. My grandmother taught me that our gift comes with responsibility. We heal because we can, not for reward. Thomas shook his head, emotions warring within him. Hope, dangerous, painful hope, fought against the skepticism he'd developed after years of medical consultations and experimental treatments. I need to think about this, he said finally. Of course, Maya replied. Take all the time you need. The offer stands whenever you're ready. That night, Thomas lay awake beside Vivian, her soft breathing the only sound in their darkened bedroom. He hadn't mentioned Maya's offer to anyone, not even Richard. It seemed too fantastical, too good to be true. And yet, what if? What if he could see again? See the sunset he'd forgotten? See the face of the woman he planned to marry? See the world his company was helping to shape? What if Maya's unusual gift was real? As if sensing his restlessness, Vivian stirred beside him. Can't sleep? She murmured, her hand finding his in the darkness. Just thinking, Thomas replied. About what? Thomas hesitated. Something held him back from sharing Maya's offer. Just business, he lied, and felt Vivian relax against him. Don't worry so much, she said, her voice already drifting back toward sleep. I'll take care of everything. In the darkness, Thomas made his decision. Tomorrow he would find Maya and accept her offer. What did he have to lose? And if by some miracle she could do what she claimed? Thomas closed his eyes, allowing himself to imagine, just for a moment, a world filled with light once more. Thomas sat perfectly still in the small treatment room Maya had set up in an unused corner of the research facility. The space smelled of unfamiliar herbs and something slightly sweet, like honey mixed with flowers. Soft music played in the background, gentle tones that seemed to vibrate not just in his ears but throughout his body. Try to relax, Maya said, her voice coming from directly in front of him. This first session is mostly about establishing a connection. Nothing dramatic will happen today. Thomas nodded, feeling slightly foolish but determined to see this through. What exactly are you going to do? I'll place my hands near your eyes, not touching, just hovering close. You might feel warmth or tingling. Some people experience light or colors, but not usually in the first session. Maya's voice was calm and matter-of-fact, not mystical or dramatic. The most important thing is that you stay open to the possibility of healing. That's the hardest part, Thomas admitted. I've spent 5 years accepting that I'll never see again. Hope feels dangerous. I understand. Maya's voice softened. We'll take it one step at a time. Ready? Thomas took a deep breath and nodded. Close your eyes, Maya instructed. Thomas almost laughed. They're always closed. Makes no difference. Humor me, Maya replied with a smile in her voice. It's part of the process. Thomas complied, feeling the familiar motion of his eyelids lowering over his useless eyes. He sensed Maya moving closer, felt the subtle shift in the air between them. I'm placing my hands near your face now, she narrated, about 2 inches from your eyes. At first, Thomas felt nothing except slightly awkward. Then gradually, he became aware of a gentle warmth radiating toward his eyes, as if someone had opened an oven door nearby. The sensation deepened, changing, from simple warmth to something more complex, a pleasant tingling that seemed to penetrate through his eyelids. They remained that way for nearly 20 minutes, neither speaking. The strange warmth continued, occasionally intensifying before receding again. Thomas found himself drifting into an almost meditative state, lulled by the soft music and the steady sensation of heat. "That's enough for today," Maya finally said, her voice breaking the peaceful silence. Thomas opened his eyes, expecting the same unrelenting darkness that had greeted him every morning for 5 years. Instead, he gasped. For just a fraction of a second, so brief he almost thought he'd imagined it. There had been something. Not sight, exactly. Not an image. But a difference. A disturbance in the perfect blackness. A shadow where no shadow should be. "Did something happen?" Maya asked, alert to his reaction. Thomas hesitated. I'm not sure. Maybe. For a moment I thought I saw. No, not saw. Sensed something different in the darkness. "That's a very good sign," Maya said, her voice carefully controlled as if trying not to show too much excitement. "Much sooner than I expected." "What does it mean?" Thomas asked, his heart suddenly racing. "It means your optic nerves aren't completely dead, just severely damaged. It means healing is possible." Maya paused. "But Thomas, please don't get your hopes too high too quickly. This will take time. Months, maybe a year of regular treatments." Thomas nodded, fighting to contain the surge of emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "When can we try again?" "Day after tomorrow. Your visual system needs time to rest between sessions." Maya touched his arm lightly. "And Thomas, I think we should keep this between us for now." "Until we're sure it's working." Thomas agreed readily. The last thing he wanted was to announce a miracle cure that might not materialize. Besides, something about this felt private, personal, a journey he wasn't ready to share, not even with Vivian. Over the following weeks, Thomas and Maya established a routine. 3 times a week, Thomas would find a reason to visit the research facility, slipping away for an hour-long session in Maya's treatment room. Each time, the strange sensations grew stronger, and the moments of something in the darkness became more frequent. After the 6th session, Thomas experienced his first unmistakable flash of light, a brief blinding moment of brightness that left him breathless. After the 10th session, he could consistently detect movement, shadowy forms passing in front of him, though he couldn't make out any details. "It's working," he whispered to Maya after a particularly successful treatment, nearly a month into their secret sessions. "I saw your hand move. Just a shadow, but I saw it." Maya squeezed his arm, her voice thick with emotion. "I knew it would. Your eyes want to heal, Thomas. They just needed help remembering how." Thomas kept his progress hidden from everyone. He continued to use his cane, to rely on his other senses, to play the part of the blind man perfectly. But inside, he was changing. Hope had taken root and was growing stronger every day. It was Richard who first noticed something was different. "You seem lighter somehow," he commented as they shared a drink in Thomas's office one evening. "More energetic. Did something happen?" Thomas shrugged. "Just feeling good about life. The wedding plans are coming along. Business is booming. What's not to be happy about?" Richard made a non-committal sound. "Speaking of business, there's something I wanted to discuss with you." Thomas heard the hesitation in his friend's voice. "What is it?" "Probably nothing," Richard said, ice cubes clinking as he swirled his drink. "Just some inconsistencies I've noticed lately." "What kind of inconsistencies?" Thomas felt his body tense. Documents going missing, changes appearing in contracts that neither of us remember approving. Richard paused. "And some unusual financial movements." Thomas frowned. "Be specific, Richard." 3 large transfers to offshore accounts in the past month, all authorized with your electronic signature. "I didn't authorize any offshore transfers," Thomas said sharply. "That's what I thought." Richard's voice was grim. "The thing is, Thomas, only 2 people have access to your electronic signature, you and Vivian." Thomas felt a cold weight settle. in his stomach. There must be some explanation. Maybe it's for the new Singapore office setup? I checked. It's not. Richard sighed. Look, I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I just think we need to be careful. Maybe update your security protocols, restrict access a bit. I'll look into it, Thomas promised, his mind racing. That night, as Vivian slept beside him, Thomas lay awake, Richard's concerns echoing in his head. He'd given Vivian access to his electronic signature shortly after their engagement, seeing it as a practical matter. She often handled correspondence and documents for him. He'd never had reason to question her trustworthiness, until now. The following day, Thomas asked his assistant to review all financial transactions from the past 3 months. The results were troubling. Not just the offshore transfers Richard had mentioned, but dozens of smaller movements, money flowing through various accounts before landing in untraceable destinations. That same afternoon, during a treatment session with Maya, Thomas experienced his most significant breakthrough. Yet, for nearly 30 seconds, he could see shapes and outlines. Blurry and indistinct, but definitely visual input. Maya's face was a pale oval hovering before him, her hand a moving shadow against the lighter background of the room. I can see you, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. Not clearly, but I can see you. Maya was crying too, her tears visible to Thomas as glistening tracks catching the light. This is amazing progress, she said. Much faster than I expected. As the temporary vision faded back to shadows, Thomas made a decision. He wouldn't tell anyone about his returning sight, not yet. If Richard's suspicions about Vivian had any merit, Thomas might have an advantage in keeping his healing secret. Over the next 2 weeks, Thomas became his own detective. With his vision sporadically, returning in longer and clearer bursts, he began to notice things he'd missed before. The way Vivian tensed when his phone rang with Richard's distinctive tone. How she always insisted on reading his emails to him, rather than letting his screen reader do the job. The late-night phone calls she took in the bathroom, voice too low to hear. One night, pretending to be asleep, Thomas witnessed something that turned his suspicions into certainty. Through the hazy, imperfect vision that now came and went unpredictably, he watched Vivian carefully open the safe hidden behind a painting in their bedroom. A safe whose combination he had never shared with her. She removed documents, photographed them with her phone, then replaced them exactly as they had been. The next morning, Thomas called Richard. I need you to do something for me, he said once he was certain Vivian had left for her yoga class, quietly with absolute discretion. Anything, Richard replied. I need you to hire a private investigator, the best you can find. Thomas took a deep breath. I need to know exactly who Vivian Reeves was before she met me. Richard was silent for a long moment. You think I was right to be concerned? I do, Thomas said grimly. And Richard, there's something else you should know. What's that? Thomas lowered his voice, though he was alone in the apartment. I can see again. Not perfectly, not consistently, but it's coming back. Richard's shocked questions tumbled out, and Thomas explained about Maya and her treatments, about keeping it secret, about the gradual return of his vision. That's incredible, Richard finally managed. But why keep it secret from Vivian? She's your fiancée. That's what I'm trying to find out, Thomas replied, whether she actually is what she claims to be. The investigation took less than a week. The results made Thomas's blood run cold. Vivian Reeves had appeared out of nowhere 18 months ago. Before that, she'd been Karen Miller, then Jennifer Hayes, then Sophia Grant, different names, different cities, but the same pattern. Wealthy men, whirlwind romances, unexplained accidents. 2 dead husbands and 1 in a permanent vegetative state, all leaving their fortunes to their beautiful, grieving wives. As Thomas sat in Richard's office listening to the investigator's report, he felt a strange calm settle over him. The pieces were falling into place. The missing documents, the financial transfers, Vivian's insistence on handling all his business correspondence. She's setting me up, Thomas said quietly when the investigator had left. Draining my accounts, gathering information, Preparing for something. The wedding is in 3 weeks, Richard reminded him. Thomas nodded, his unseeing eyes fixed on the window. Except they weren't entirely unseeing anymore. Through the blur and shadows, he could make out the vague shapes of buildings against the sky. We need to be careful, Thomas said. She can't know that I suspect anything, and she absolutely cannot know about my vision returning. What are you going to do? Richard asked. Thomas smiled grimly. Set a trap. But first, I need to see her clearly. I need to look my would-be killer in the eye. That evening, as he waited for Vivian to return home, Thomas scheduled another treatment with Maya. His vision was improving faster than either of them had anticipated. Soon, he would see clearly enough to catch Vivian in her betrayal. And when he did, she would never see it coming. I need to see more clearly, Thomas told Maya during their next session. The wedding is less than 3 weeks away. I'm running out of time. Maya frowned, her face a blurry oval in Thomas's improving but still limited vision. I understand your urgency, but healing can't be rushed. Push too hard and we risk setbacks. What if we increase the frequency of our sessions? Thomas suggested. Twice a day instead of 3 times a week? Maya hesitated. It's not recommended. Your visual system needs rest between treatments to integrate the healing. Please, Thomas said, leaning forward. You don't understand what's at stake. Maya was quiet for a long moment. There is something we could try, she finally said. A more intensive approach my grandmother used in emergency situations, but Thomas, it carries risks. What kind of risks? Pain, for one. Significant discomfort during and after the treatment, and the possibility of temporary setbacks, periods of complete blindness between moments of sight. Maya's voice was serious. I've only seen it done twice. It's not something we use lightly. Thomas didn't hesitate. I'll take the risk. Maya sighed. Then we'll begin tomorrow. Come here at sunrise. The early morning hours are most powerful for deep healing work. And Thomas? Come alone. This process requires complete focus from both of us. The next morning, Thomas slipped out of bed while Vivian was still sleeping. Early meeting, he murmured when she stirred. Go back to sleep. The sky was just beginning to lighten as his driver dropped him at the research facility. Maya was waiting at the side entrance, a small bag in her hands. Are you sure about this? She asked as she led him to the treatment room. Completely, Thomas replied. The room had been transformed. The usual soft music was replaced by complete silence. The herbal scent was stronger, almost overwhelming. New items had been added. A small burner with something bubbling on it, several small bowls arranged in a semicircle, and a cushioned mat on the floor. Lie down, Maya instructed. Try to get comfortable. This will take much longer than our usual sessions. Thomas did as he was told, lowering himself onto the mat. He could make out Maya's silhouette moving around the room, preparing things he couldn't quite see. I'm going to apply a salve around your eyes, she explained. It might burn a little at first. A little proved to be an understatement. As soon as the cool paste touched his skin, Thomas felt a searing sensation that made him gasp. Breathe through it, Maya said firmly. The discomfort will pass. Thomas gritted his teeth, focusing on his breathing as the burning intensified, then gradually subsided into a deep, pulsing warmth. Now I'm going to place my hands directly on your eyes, Maya said. This is different from our previous work. It will be intense. When Maya's palms covered his eyes, Thomas nearly bolted upright. The sensation was electric, as if someone had connected his optic nerves directly to a power source. Sparks of light exploded in his darkness, random and chaotic. Stay with it, Maya urged. Don't fight what you're seeing. The kaleidoscope of lights continued, gradually organizing into patterns, then shapes, then blurry but recognizable forms. Thomas could see Maya's hands, his own body, the ceiling above him. Everything was bathed in strange, pulsating colors, but unmistakably visible. The intensive treatment continued for over 3 hours. Sometimes Maya would remove her hands, apply more of the burning salve, then resume her position. Sometimes she would chant quietly in a language Thomas didn't recognize. The visions came and went, each time lasting longer, becoming clearer. Finally, Maya sat back. "That's all for today," she said, her voice tired. Thomas blinked several times, marveling at the relatively clear vision that greeted him. The room was still somewhat blurry, colors muted and edges soft. But he could see. Actually see. "This is amazing," he whispered, looking around in wonder. "It won't last," Maya warned. "Not yet. The clarity will fade in a few hours. You'll likely experience periods of darkness again before your next treatment." She was right. By mid-afternoon, Thomas's vision began to dim, eventually returning to the familiar shadows and vague forms he'd grown accustomed to in recent weeks. But something had changed. He now knew what lay on the other side of his darkness, and he was more determined than ever to reach it permanently. Over the next week, Thomas and Maya repeated the intensive treatment every morning. Each session brought longer periods of clarity, more detail, more color. Thomas began to recognize faces, Maya's gentle features, Richard's concerned expression, and finally, for the first time, Vivian's beautiful but calculating countenance. Seeing her clearly was a shock. She was stunning, yes, but there was something in her eyes Thomas had never been able to detect before. A coldness, a distance that belied her warm, loving voice. Thomas continued to play his part. The blind fiancé, dependent and trusting. But with his periodically functioning vision, he began to gather evidence of Vivian's betrayal. One afternoon, pretending to nap on the couch, he watched through barely open eyes as Vivian used his laptop, accessing files she had no reason to open. Another day, he saw her meeting with a man in a coffee shop near their apartment, the same man who, according to Richard's investigator, had been linked to the deaths of her previous husbands. Most damning of all was what Thomas witnessed 10 days before the wedding. Returning home unexpectedly when a meeting was canceled, his vision surprisingly clear that afternoon. He saw Vivian in his home office with a stack of documents. She was carefully tracing his signature onto what appeared to be legal papers, practicing until the forgery was nearly perfect. Thomas retreated silently, his heart pounding. That evening he met with Richard and a trusted lawyer. "We need to move up the timeline," he told them, sliding a folder across the table. "She's getting ready to make her move." Inside the folder were photos Richard's investigator had taken. Vivian meeting with known associates of her previous husbands, copies of the forged documents Thomas had found hidden in their apartment, records of the financial transfers to offshore accounts. "There's enough here to have her arrested," the lawyer said, reviewing the evidence. Thomas shook his head. "Not yet. I want to understand the full extent of her plan first, and I want her to incriminate herself beyond any doubt." "That's dangerous, Thomas," Richard warned. "What if she realizes you can see?" "She won't," Thomas said confidently. "I've been blind for 5 years. I know how to act the part perfectly." "And your vision?" the lawyer asked. "How reliable is it now?" "It comes and goes," Thomas admitted. "But the clear periods are lasting longer each day. Maya thinks another week of treatments will make the restoration permanent." They formulated a plan. Thomas would continue his treatments with Maya while gathering evidence against Vivian. Richard would quietly put safeguards in place around Black Tech's assets. The lawyer would prepare the necessary legal documents to protect Thomas once everything came to light. Meanwhile, the wedding preparations continued. Vivian threw herself into the details with seemingly genuine enthusiasm, planning what she believed would be the beginning of her most lucrative con yet. 7 days before the wedding, Thomas experienced his first full day of uninterrupted vision. It wasn't perfect. Some colors still appeared faded and distant objects remained slightly blurry. But it was consistent. That evening, he met with Maya for what they both felt might be their final treatment. "Your eyes have almost completely healed," Maya said, examining him with professional satisfaction. "The nerve regeneration is remarkable." "Thanks to you," Thomas said warmly. Maya shook her head. "I only facilitated what your body wanted to do. The healing came from within you. Still, I owe you everything. Thomas took her hands in his. How can I ever repay you? Seeing you recover is payment enough, Maya said simply. My grandmother always taught me our gift wasn't meant to be sold, only shared. Thomas nodded, respecting her principles but already forming plans to fund her research, to help her develop her family's healing techniques into treatments that could help others. Will you be at the charity gala tomorrow night? He asked as he prepared to leave. I wasn't planning to, Maya replied. Those fancy events aren't really my scene. Please come, Thomas urged. I have a feeling it's going to be a memorable evening. The charity gala was being held at the same hotel where Thomas had first met Vivian almost 6 months earlier. The guest list included Black Tech's most important clients and partners, along with the city's business and social elite. It would be, Thomas had decided, the perfect place for the truth to be revealed. That morning, Thomas met with Richard one last time to review their plan. Are you absolutely sure about this? Richard asked, concern evident in his voice. There are less public ways to handle it. I'm sure, Thomas said firmly. She humiliated me, manipulated me, planned to steal everything I've built. The revelation should match the crime. Richard nodded reluctantly. The security team is briefed. The documents are ready, and the police will be standing by, though out of sight. Perfect. Thomas smiled grimly. And the special arrangements? All taken care of, Richard confirmed. Everything will be in place. That evening, as Thomas and Vivian prepared for the gala, he watched her through fully functioning eyes, marveling at how completely he had been deceived. She moved with practiced grace, her smile never reaching her eyes when she thought he couldn't see her. You look beautiful, Thomas told her as she twirled in her gown, playing her part to the end. Thank you, darling, Vivian replied, coming over to straighten his tie. Are you ready for tonight? It's our last big event before becoming husband and wife. Thomas smiled, allowing her to lead him toward the door as if he still needed her guidance. Oh, I'm ready, he said softly. Tonight is going to change everything. The grand ballroom of the Westmont Hotel glittered with chandeliers and evening gowns. Thomas moved through the crowd with his cane, still playing the part of the blind man perfectly. Vivian clung to his arm, guiding him, introducing him to people he could now clearly see. Thomas, Vivian, you both look wonderful, said Nancy Winters, the hospital board chairwoman. The wedding countdown must be exciting. Just 5 more days. We can hardly wait, Vivian gushed, squeezing Thomas's arm. Thomas smiled, feeling the weight of the small recorder hidden in his jacket pocket. Every word Vivian spoke tonight was being captured, adding to the mountain of evidence against her. Thomas, I need to speak with the event planner about our seating arrangement, Vivian said after they'd made their rounds. Will you be all right at the bar for a few minutes? Of course, Thomas replied. I think I can manage to find my scotch without my eyes. As soon as Vivian walked away, Richard appeared at Thomas's side. Everything's ready, he murmured. Maya just arrived. The lawyer is here with the police detective. They're waiting in the side room as planned. Thomas nodded slightly. And the presentation? Set for 9 p.m. right after dinner. Richard hesitated. Are you sure you don't want to handle this privately? She didn't just try to steal my money, Richard. She was going to kill me. Thomas's voice was quiet but hard. I want witnesses when she's exposed. Across the room, Thomas spotted Maya entering the ballroom. She looked beautiful but uncomfortable in a simple blue dress, her eyes scanning the crowd nervously until she found him. Thomas gave her a small nod of reassurance. The evening proceeded according to plan. During dinner, Thomas continued to play, his role flawlessly, asking Vivian to cut his steak, reaching carefully for his water glass, turning his head slightly when people spoke to him as if tracking their voices. At 8:55 p.m., Richard approached the podium at the front of the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please, he called out. We have a special presentation this evening from our host and my dear friend, Thomas Blackwood. A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. Thomas rarely made speeches at these events since his accident. What's going on? Vivian whispered, her hand suddenly tight on Thomas's arm. You didn't mention a speech. A last-minute addition, Thomas said smoothly. Just a brief thank you to our donors. He stood, unfolding his cane with practiced ease, and made his way to the podium, purposely stumbling once to maintain the illusion. Vivian watched him with narrowed eyes, the first hint of suspicion crossing her perfect features. Good evening, everyone, Thomas began, his voice strong and clear. Thank you all for supporting the Children's Hospital tonight. Your generosity will change many young lives. He paused, his eyes, still hidden behind dark glasses, scanning the room. Some of you have known me for many years. You've seen my successes and failures, watched me build black tech from nothing, witnessed my struggle after the accident that took my sight. Thomas removed his dark glasses slowly. But appearances can be deceiving. Sometimes the things we think we see most clearly are the very things that blind us to the truth. The room had gone completely silent. 6 months ago, at a gala much like this one, I met a woman who seemed like a dream come true. Thomas turned his head deliberately toward Vivian. She was beautiful, charming, attentive. She quickly became my closest companion, my fiancée, and the person I trusted most in the world. Vivian shifted uncomfortably in her seat, glancing toward the exit. What I didn't know then was that Vivian Reeves wasn't who she claimed to be. Thomas's voice hardened. In fact, Vivian Reeves didn't exist at all. A collective gasp went through the room. Vivian stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Thomas, you're confused, she called out, her voice honeyed with concern. Let me help you back to your seat. I don't need help, Vivian. Not anymore. Thomas looked directly at her, a focused, deliberate stare that stopped her in her tracks. Because I can see you. I can see everything now. For a moment, the ballroom was utterly silent. Then whispers erupted as people began to understand what was happening. He can see? Is this some kind of joke? Look at his eyes, they're following her. Vivian recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. Darling, what are you talking about? This isn't funny. You're right, it's not funny, Thomas agreed. It's criminal, just like the identities you've been cycling through for years. Karen Miller, Jennifer, Hayes, Sophia Grant. Just like what happened to your previous husbands. Vivian's face hardened, her mask of loving concern falling away. You're making a scene, Thomas. You're embarrassing yourself. Let me tell you what isn't embarrassing, Thomas continued, his voice steady. The red dress you're wearing tonight. The diamond necklace I gave you last month. The champagne glass in your right hand. The exit sign you've been staring at for the past 2 minutes, wondering if you can reach it before security stops you. With each detail, Vivian's face grew paler. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. That's impossible, she whispered. You're blind. I was, Thomas agreed. But thanks to Maya. He gestured toward Maya, who stood nervously at the side of the room. My sight has been returning for weeks. Long enough to see you forging my signature. Long enough to watch you photographing confidential documents. Long enough to catch you meeting with the same man linked to your last husband's accident. Richard stepped forward, nodding to security personnel who had moved to block the exits. We have evidence of everything, Vivian. Financial fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. A distinguished older man, the police detective, approached Vivian, who was now backing away, her eyes darting frantically around the room. This is ridiculous, she spat. You can't prove anything. Actually, we can, Thomas said quietly. He pressed a button on the podium, and a screen lowered from the ceiling. The projector flickered to life, showing crystal clear footage of Vivian in Thomas's office, rifling through his safe, practicing his signature, speaking on the phone about making it look like an accident. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Vivian's crimes played out before them. When the video ended, the detective stepped forward. Vivian Reeves, or whatever your real name is, you're under arrest, he said, producing handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Vivian's composure finally cracked. You stupid man, she hissed at Thomas. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? This isn't over. Actually, it is, Thomas replied calmly. Your partners have already been arrested. The money you stole has been traced. It's completely over. As the detective led Vivian away, the ballroom erupted in confused chatter. Thomas raised his hands for silence. "I owe you all an explanation," he said. "And I owe a particular debt of gratitude to one person." He gestured for Maya to join him at the podium. She came forward reluctantly, her face flushed with embarrassment at being the center of attention. "This is Maya Chen," Thomas announced. "She comes from a family with a remarkable gift for healing. When we met by accident, literally, when she spilled coffee on me." The crowd chuckled, breaking some of the tension. "She offered to try to heal my eyes using techniques passed down through generations in her family." Maya spoke up, her voice soft but clear. "My grandmother always taught me that our gift was meant to be shared, not sold. That true healing comes from connection, not transaction." "I didn't believe it was possible," Thomas continued. 5 years of darkness had taught me to accept my limitations. But Maya gave me something I'd lost long before my accident: hope." He turned to face the crowd, seeing their faces clearly for the first time. The shock, the wonder, the questions in their eyes. "The treatments weren't quick or easy," he explained. "My vision returned gradually, in flashes and fragments. But, as it did, I began to see things I'd missed, including the truth about the woman I was planning to marry." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of questions, explanations, and congratulations. People wanted to know everything: how Maya had healed him, how he'd discovered Vivian's plan, what would happen next. Through it all, Thomas kept Maya close by his side, watching with new eyes as she fielded questions about her family's healing, traditions with quiet dignity and intelligence. "You've given me back my sight," he told her during a rare quiet moment. "How can I ever repay you?" Maya smiled, her eyes meeting his without hesitation. "Seeing you use your gift to protect yourself and others is payment enough." "I'd like to do more," Thomas insisted. "Your family's healing techniques should be studied, documented, shared with the world. With your permission, I'd like to establish a research foundation." "You would direct it, of course." Maya's eyes widened. "You would do that?" "It would be my privilege," Thomas replied sincerely. Later that night, long after the last guests had departed and Vivian had been processed at the police station, Thomas stood at the window of his penthouse, looking out at the city lights. For 5 years he had lived in a world of darkness, learning to navigate by sound and touch and memory. Now, colors and shapes and movement filled his vision once more. Yet the most valuable insight hadn't come from his restored eyesight, but from the journey itself. He had learned to look beyond appearances, to trust in possibilities others dismissed, to recognize the light that can emerge from even the darkest circumstances. In the reflection of the window, Thomas saw Maya approach, her face illuminated by the city glow. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said, following his gaze to the nighttime skyline. "Yes," Thomas agreed, but he was looking at her, not the view. Some things are worth waiting to see. Outside, the city sparkled with thousands of lights, each one a reminder that darkness is never permanent. Thomas Blackwood, who had lost everything, then gained it back along with something more precious, knew that better than anyone. The future stretched before him, bright with possibilities he could now finally clearly see.